Welcome to the Brainy8 Show, where we talk about all things Salesforce, sharing the coolest features, solutions, and best practices to turn you into a Salesforce rock star. Here's your host, former attorney turned Salesforce consultant and trainer, David Giller.
In this session, we're going to talk about best practices around how to roll out end user training for your Salesforce users. And for those of you who have not attended any of these sessions before, these are meant to be interactive sessions. So yes, I certainly have a whole lot of information to share, but from my perspective, this is really all about you guys and about trying to help you to gain the insights and share best practices and tips that you need to help with some of the Salesforce related struggles that you're faced with. In complete transparency, this particular presentation I've actually used quite a few times to present at Dreamforce, to present at World Tours. And the sort of framework behind this particular presentation is really about those people, those Salesforce admins who are struggling with training people on how to use Lightning, because that adds like one additional wrinkle to one additional layer of complexity to training end users. It's one thing where it is certainly daunting just to be able to train end users, and it certainly adds a whole other wrinkle when you as the admin are relatively new to Lightning. So you might be super comfortable with Classic. You might even have everything around training users in Classic down pat. There's no need to train them because everybody knows how to use Classic. And then all of a sudden Lightning comes on board. So it definitely adds a whole other layer of complexity. The other thing that I'll say is, even if you find yourself where, okay, all I ever knew was Lightning, you will still gain a whole lot out of this particular presentation. I purposely designed it in a way that it should be relatively flexible and nimble based on whatever it is that you need as it relates to training end users on how to use Salesforce. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is David Giller. I'm CEO of Brainy8. And during this session, I'm going to help you position yourself for career growth and job security. And honestly, that's what excites me the most out of even doing these sessions, because I feel that by sharing my knowledge and expertise, I'm able to empower all of you to do even better at your own jobs and your own careers. So through this presentation, through sharing my best practices, I'm hoping that you will be able to position yourselves as a resident expert, not only as it relates to Lightning experience, but also as it relates to your own, the internal expert within your organization on your own internal business processes. Because more often than not, what I've found is that the only person who really understands the internal business processes of who does what, when and why certain teams use DocuSign, let's say, and why others don't, who gets assigned certain types of accounts or customer service tickets, usually it's the Salesforce admin who knows that the best out of the entire organization. So if you're not already in that position, so by following the guidelines that I'm going to be sharing with you, you're going to position yourself as the organization's problem solver. You're going to be an expert in your own internal business processes, in the team dynamics, how different teams either work with each other, work alongside each other. Maybe they don't interact directly. Maybe they're doing similar, maybe even identical processes side by side. You're going to also be an expert on the internal tools and how they're being used by your users within the organization, which is in turn going to help you position yourself for job security and for future promotions within your organization. So I'm going to break this down into basically two different elements. One is, what is it that I need? What is it that I need to know myself as the admin who's trying to take on this responsibility of training my end users? And secondly, how do I put together my game plan? Like, what do I do? So, okay, I need to build some skills myself. And then what is it that I need to actually do after I build those skills? So as it relates to what is it that you need to know, that comes down to three components. The first one, you certainly need to know Lightning experience. If you're going to train people on Lightning, you need to know Lightning. The next one, the second one is you need to identify who is it internally within your organization that needs training. And by the way, the answer is way more complex than all users or just these people who sit right over here. It's more than that, and we're going to unpack these things in a little bit. And the next thing that you need, the third thing that you need to know, you need to understand is exactly what features need to be taught. So let's go ahead and start unpacking each of these. So the first one is actually the easiest. In order to learn Lightning experience, I can pretty much guarantee that all of you can guess what I'm about to recommend next, which is Trailhead. So certainly on Trailhead, you can go ahead and you can learn if you're not already familiar with the features of Lightning experience, you can go ahead and leverage Trailhead. It's right there, it's free, it's available anytime, anywhere, where you can go ahead and learn all of the different features that are available in Lightning experience. In addition to getting an understanding of what is the functionality parity, what are the differences, what are the gaps between Classic and Lightning experience, in case you are most concerned about getting presented with those kind of questions of, well, wait, I used to be able to do this in Classic, can I do the same thing in Lightning experience? So Trailhead is really the easiest way for you to get an understanding of the features that you need to know in Lightning experience. Next, who needs training? The answer is more complex than what most people think. The first thing that you need to do is you need to get an understanding of which departments, if you're rolling out Lightning experience, which departments will actually be using Lightning experience, or which departments actually need the training, are raising their hands and basically saying, yeah, we need training. But then you need to go one layer deeper than that. And this is so incredibly important. Who are the individuals within each group? As you start to identify the individuals, and we're talking about like identifying them by name. Once you can start identifying them by name, it will also come out very naturally the differences or similarities between those people. So in other words, we might say the departments are going to be sales, marketing, and customer service. Okay, now let's start listing them out by name. Once you start listing them out by name, you're going to see that, the following 10 people, they do sales, but they actually do consumer sales. The next 15 people, they're also in sales, but they actually do B2B sales. They do maybe government sales. And then you're going to identify, okay, the following people, let's say in customer service, they work on only the following 5 types of tickets, and everyone else works on all the other kinds of tickets that might come out. So you need to get an understanding of not only in broad strokes, which groups within the organization need training, but the actual individuals. And that will help you identify both the similarities and the differences among those people. Next, we need to focus on what features need to be taught. In order to do this, what you really need to do is you need to reference that list that you created in the prior step of all of the different people that need to get trained within each group. And from there, you need to identify who is the best representative or plural representatives for each group that you need to partner up with. And basically what you need to do is you need to get an understanding of what they do, their business processes. You need to basically put yourself in the shoes of an employee in that team, as if you are a brand new member of that team, to understand what they do, why they do it, what tools they use to do it. I guarantee they're not always using Excel for every single process, and that's not necessarily a problem that they're not using Excel for every step in the process. I'm sorry, that they're not using Salesforce for every step in the process. That's not necessarily a problem. There are many times where, for all kinds of justified reasons, they're using other systems, and that's okay. You still need to be aware of that. And that's the reason why you need to be aware of that, and how and when and why those other systems are used, is because when you're doing the training, you don't want to get hit with a question where your response is basically deer in the headlights. You're like, oh, I don't know what the heck are you talking about? No, you need to know that in advance, and you need to be able to answer appropriately, because as you're sitting with those subject matter experts and they're teaching and showing you, here's what we do, here's how I do my job, here's how I handle the customer support tickets. First, maybe they say, first we get it in as it's a phone call that comes in, or maybe someone emails it to you. A customer emails me the issue, and then I go and cut and paste and turn it into into a Salesforce record by actually creating the case. You need to be aware of that. You need to understand the context. You need to understand, does that always happen, or does it only happen sometimes? Does it happen for all groups within customer service, or does it only happen within certain groups within customer service? You're going to be asking those questions as you uncover all of the different steps in the process. It's going to come out very naturally. The next thing that you need to do is you need to actually look over their shoulder as they're actually doing those steps in Salesforce. And if, let's say we're talking about having users move from Salesforce Classic into Lightning Experience, then you need to actually see how they're doing it today in Salesforce Classic. That's going to be incredibly insightful for you, because you're going to see how later on in this within the best practices that I'm about to share with you, how you're going to be relying on those that sort of walk through, click through steps of what they're doing in Salesforce to relay back to them and turn it into part of your curriculum. So it's really, really important. Some best practices here. Make sure to take a lot of notes. Make sure to grab screenshots where it's practical. Make sure that the person that you're interacting with, the person that you're sitting with in order to share the best practices, the person who's actually showing you how they do it, make sure that, first of all, they know what they're talking about. Make sure that they truly do represent the other members of their team that they claim to represent. So let's say if someone says, okay, from everyone that we have in sales, you should sit and work with Susan. And as you're working with Susan, you need to sort of confirm, so Susan, everything that you showed me, like, this is how everyone does it? Because you might find out, no, that's only how like the East Coast team does it. The West Coast team does it slightly differently. And she may or may not know how the other teams are doing it. She might tell you, you need to talk to Frank. He'll describe what the West Coast team does. So you need to make sure that the person that you've partnered up with truly does represent everyone on that team, because it could be horrific if you get in the front of the room and you're doing training based on what Susan described to you, and half the room is like, I don't know what you're talking about. We don't do that. So you need to make sure that the person you're working with truly represents everyone on the team. Next, you need to make sure to capture the pain points that they are articulating during these walkthroughs. And sometimes they're not actually articulating it. Sometimes these are pain points that you are just mortified looking. You're like, oh my God, I can't believe you're cutting and pasting this information all over the place. Or I can't believe that you're cutting and pasting it from Salesforce into Excel, and then later after your boss updates it in Excel, you're cutting and pasting back from Excel into Salesforce. So you need to identify these sometimes crazy, sometimes wacky, sometimes simply inefficient pain points that are coming out during this process. I'm going to sort of pause here and ask if anyone has any questions on anything I talked about so far.
I do, David. This is Jean.
Yep.
But you might cover it later. You know, you were just saying how, you know, maybe the West Coast team does it one way and the East Coast team does it another way. But they're all going to be trained together at the same time.
Not necessarily. Nope. So that's part of, sometimes it needs to come out organically. If they are different or they are the same, that's how you're going to identify how to build out the curriculum. And so yes, that part I do cover later.
Okay.
But go ahead, ask the rest of your question, or was that it?
Well, no, I was just wondering, you know, if the stakeholders come to you and say, you got one day to train everybody.
Okay, so we're definitely going to cover that as it relates to not only building out the curriculum, how to actually deliver that training, and whether it's in person, whether it's online, and what kind of time frames to allocate. Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. So I see Chrissy asked a question in the chat window, and it's actually a great question. What do you suggest in terms of shadowing people remotely? Honestly, this is what I typically do, because for the most part, I'm generally speaking, I am working remotely with clients, helping them out. And the way we do it is essentially through Zoom. I mean, it could be GoToMeeting, it could be Google Hangouts, it really, WebEx, it really doesn't matter. And what you do is you have them walk you through, first conceptually to explain, here's what I'm doing, but at the same time, when it comes to a system, the system, it could be email, it could be a web form, it could be Excel, it could be Salesforce, whatever system they're using, they need to start sharing their screen and show you. So it should feel like you are looking over their shoulder, whether you're sitting right next to them or you're doing it remotely. And the best thing that you can do when you're using any tool like Zoom, GoToMeeting, WebEx, etc., record it, because by recording it, it's going to help you. It'll help relieve the pressure from you of taking all of the meticulous notes. By recording it, you're going to have the screenshots, you're going to have the dialogue that happened that you can refer back to sort of unpack some of those things later on and keep you focused on the conversation at hand. So that's a great question. Thank you for asking, Chrissy. Any other questions that anyone else has before I continue? All righty. All right, so we talked about what you need to know. So up until now, you sort of absorbed all kinds of information. You absorbed information from Salesforce and how to use Lightning Experience from Trailhead. You absorbed information from your team members in terms of who is it that needs training, both in terms of the larger groups, identifying the groups by name, by category, by division, by department, as well as the individuals. And then you absorbed information in terms of what is it that they need to actually know and do in Salesforce, and what is it that they are doing today? How is it that they are operating today? Now, by the way, even if they're not moving from Classic to Lightning Experience, and they're simply showing you, here's how I log a call today, you might uncover, and again, this might be moments of where you're gasping, like, holy crap, I can't believe you're doing it like that, where they're clicking, let's say to log a call, they're clicking 3 extra steps because nobody taught them how to do it. Or even worse, they're not clicking 3 extra steps to finally get to that log a call button to log the call. Instead, they're throwing it into like a big old ugly text field, or the description field on the opportunity, instead of actually logging it as a call. So you're going to uncover all of these things regardless of whether they're moving from Classic to Lightning or whether they're just in Lightning Experience. So up until now, you've been absorbing information. Now is where we're actually rolling up our sleeves and we're actually going to start doing some things. So I broke it down into 3 components once again. The first step is you're going to simulate the user walkthrough in Lightning Experience. The next thing that you're going to do is you're going to build out your curriculum based on the notes that you took from the meetings, the walkthrough, the sit-through meetings that you had looking over the shoulder of the users who need to get trained. And the last thing that you're going to do is actually deliver the training. Now, keep in mind here, I basically showed you, I've showed you 3 steps in the prior component and then 3 steps here. And most people, when they're asked to do, or when they think about doing end user training, all they think about is, okay, what time, what day, let's just get people in a room. I'll get to the front of the room and let's start teaching them Salesforce. No, you need to do all of this homework first. It's really, really important. So let's unpack each of these. So the first one, simulating the user walkthrough in Lightning Experience. So before, you sat through watching how these employees are actually doing their jobs in Lightning Experience. Now you are actually logged in, even if this is the first time that you're in Lightning Experience, you are actually logged in, putting yourself in the shoes of that particular user. Excuse me, even better if you could do the login as feature, so you can actually log in as that user and go ahead and simulate everything that they were doing before, how you would do it if you were them in Lightning Experience. In other words, how to do it the right way. And this is going to be very revealing to you. This is going to be revealing because it's going to identify for you as the admin, you're going to start to realize, oh, wait a minute, they need to use the opportunity tab, and the opportunity tab is not necessarily visible on the top of the screen, or the opportunity related list is not necessarily visible on the page layout for the accounts and contacts, or they never use leads. Why on earth do they have a tab on the top for leads? All of these things are going to start becoming apparent to you. They're going to stand out to you. The end user would never, ever know these things. But for you as the admin, they would start being a little bit obvious to you. And now you're going to start to walk away. You're going to start to build for yourself some takeaway items to further enhance the Salesforce configuration before you actually do the training. And it will also allow you to confirm that all of the steps that they need to do today in order to do their jobs, that all of those features and functionality are available to them in Lightning Experience. So that's going to give you monumental confidence that these users, everything that they explained to you in terms of their business process, everything that they showed you in terms of what they need to do, that it actually can be done in Lightning Experience. And at the same time, because you identified previously those pain points that they're experiencing today, again, whether or not they think of them as pain points, they might just think of it as, yeah, that's how we do it. But you might have identified it as pain points. So this is going to also help you identify here are the areas to really call out as newly introduced efficiencies that you can sort of wow them as a team to get them excited about what you're about to train them on. So the first thing you're going to do is simulate the walkthrough in Lightning Experience, placing yourself in the shoes of these end users. The next thing that you're going to do is you're going to start building out your curriculum. And this is where you're looking back at your notes. And from your notes, you're going to start to identify what are the different things that I need to teach them on how to do in Salesforce. So here's an example where you can see if I were doing training for 3 different groups, one for sales, one for marketing, one for customer service. Here are the different things, the different key elements, the different key areas of functionality that I need to train them on. So one of the things that you might see, for example, and this is purely an example, for example, you could see in sales, I'm training them on opportunities. And in many organizations, as much as I disagree with it, in many organizations, they're not teaching them, they don't want them using the campaigns functionality. By the way, the reason why I disagree with it is because I personally believe that side note, I personally believe that the campaigns functionality in Salesforce, native out-of-the-box campaign functionality, is so powerful and so important to train sales users on, just as it relates to calling campaigns, or when a sales rep is going to, let's say, visit a particular geographical area. Let's say I'm planning on visiting Boston. I want to identify all of my leads and customers that are in the Boston area. I want to put them into a campaign. I want to start calling them, inviting them to dinner and telling them, hey, I'm going to be out in the area in a couple of weeks. Can I visit you? So I would definitely train them in campaigns. But for a lot of organizations, they don't want them trained in campaigns. Okay, fine, we're not going to train you on campaigns. Also, you'll see in sales, they're not necessarily getting trained on cases because they're never expected to navigate over to cases. We don't want them using cases. Okay, fine. So you can see in sales, we have some of the core functionality over here that's relevant for sales. And then in marketing, you could see opportunities is nowhere to be found. There is no need in the world to train marketing folks on how to work with opportunities. We're not asking them to create list views on opportunities, to update anyone's pipeline. They don't ever need to look at opportunities. It might even be, we might even go so far to say that we want to hide opportunities. It's completely not relevant. It's really none of their business from a marketing perspective for them to ever see opportunities. But of course, they're going to see campaigns. And we need to teach them how to use campaigns. And from a customer service perspective, we might say, okay, get rid of campaigns and get rid of opportunities, but we need to put in cases. Now, of course, you're going to enhance this type of, I'm just giving you bare bones framework over here. You need to further enhance any of the curricula that you're doing for each of your groups by also introducing the different third-party apps or the different external, maybe the integrations that you'll have within your organization. Maybe you need to teach them how to use, let's say, Cirrus Insight or DocuSign or the Box.com integration or whatever other third-party apps you might be using. And once again, not all groups of users are using those apps. And even if all users are using those apps, chances are that they're using them slightly differently. So you need to even understand within the context for each group, the use case of how they're utilizing those apps, so that when you're doing you're actually delivering the training, you're teaching them how to use those apps from within the context, the typical use case, using the appropriate terminology, the appropriate examples that are relevant for each group. I'm going to pause here and ask if anyone has any questions on anything I talked about so far. Good so far? Alexis, thanks for upvoting on the campaigns. All right, moving on along. So the next thing that you need to do is deliver the training. And this is where often I find myself butting heads with the people who are asking me to do the training, because very often people have very unrealistic expectations as it relates to the method of actually rolling out the training, the time you need to roll out the training. And this is where I often bring up a couple of analogies that very often people people can relate to the analogies, because I find that a lot of times I can talk until I'm blue in the face. But once I start bringing up some of these analogies, it's like, oh yeah, that makes sense. So let's talk about teaching people whether it's, and it doesn't matter if we're talking about using Salesforce for the first time, or we're talking about going from classic to lightning experience. And very often I will encounter a situation where someone will say, okay, I need you to train my users, and all I'm giving you is an hour. Or sometimes they'll say, all I'm giving you is a half day. Okay, I'll bring them in even for a full day session, a boot camp, and you'll train them in a full day. And now I turn to them and I say, do you remember what it was like for you to learn how to drive a car? And could you imagine if I turned to someone and I said, okay, I'm going to teach you all how to drive a car. We're going to come into one classroom for an entire day, and I'm going to teach you everything. Even though you've never driven a car before, I'm going to teach you everything that you need to know in one day. And then that's it. You can go ahead and start driving a car. Is that going to work? No, that's never going to fly. Because the first thing that you need to do is you need to teach them, if they've never used lightning experience before, you need to spend at least an hour simply training them on navigating around Salesforce, because the entire navigation is different. The search is different. It's more powerful, but it's different. The tabs work different. You have features like global actions and favorites. That's different. A lot of things are very, very different just from navigating around. So imagine you're teaching people that they've never sat behind a steering wheel before, and you're teaching them everything from how a car operates to all of the options on the dashboard, how to use the key fob to even unlock the car, to actually driving a car. You're going to do that all in one day. It's information overload. Let alone when you have situations, and believe me, I've been there many, many times, where you have information where, situations where people say, okay, all I'm giving you is an hour. Oh, you're not getting more than 2 hours from my sales team. I need them to close deals. I don't have time to have them sit in the room and learn Salesforce. That's not going to fly either. So my recommendation is, it's okay if let's say an organization really wants to do classroom style training, and we're going to get to this, and I'm going to unpack this even more in a moment. Even if they want classroom style training and they're ready to pay the money to fly everyone in, to come in, to sit in a room and do the training, that's okay. But I try to set their expectations that, again, going back to the analogy of learning how to drive a car, chances are that once we get past the first hour, they're not really absorbing any other information the rest of the day. I'll keep talking. I'll keep training them on everything, but they're really not going to absorb a whole lot more information. So from my perspective, if I'm sort of forced into these situations, I always turn to them and say, in addition to doing the classroom style training, we're also going to do in 1 hour increments. We're going to do remote training on the individual topics, going back to think about the curriculum, the sample curriculum that I showed you earlier. Each topic, allocate approximately an hour. Sometimes it could even be an hour and a half. When you get to topics like reports and dashboards, it could easily be 2 hours, by the way. So just do ballpark an hour, hour and a half for each of those sessions. Do them remote. And when you're doing them remote, you're actually recording them. And this way you're doing it in bite-sized chunks, and you're actually recording it. And this way you're building a library of training resources that are available for your end users to use later on. Let's switch gears for a moment and talk about now what happens when, okay, so people might say, well, that's all fine and dandy. And you know what? We're right now, it's not that we're new to Salesforce. We've been using Salesforce for years. We've been using Classic. You just need to teach us Lightning. So you're just going to have an hour to teach us how to use Lightning. Well, for that too, I'm going to say, if you recall what it was like, or think about anytime you've given an older person who's never used a smartphone before, and you give them a smartphone for the first time. So typically what happens? Typically, let's say, they look at the smartphone and they start a phone call and they don't know how to end the call. So they try slamming it down on a table, like a legacy kind of phone or a flip phone, or a regular landline phone. And they start slamming it down on the table, and they're just going to get frustrated, and it's not going to work. And if you try to teach someone how to use a smartphone, someone who has never used a smartphone before, they've, let's say, only used a landline, or they've only used flip phones before, and you try to teach them how to use a smartphone, again, it's a lot of information, because there's a lot of new functionality that's available in the smartphone that it takes a while to unpack it. It takes a while to digest it mentally. And again, after the first hour, hour and a half, it's information overload. People can't take in that much information in one time. And if they will only give you an hour and a half, you're barely going to scratch the surface. The session's going to be over. And in the end, everyone is going to feel that, let's keep with the analogy of the phone, that the phone is really a giant paperweight. Because in the end, people are going to be like, yeah, I can still make phone calls like I did before. Yeah, I can still send text messages and all like I did before. But it's kind of clunky and whatever. And like, I don't even know why can't we just go back to the old one? Versus if you can actually spend the time of explaining and showing them all of the benefits, all of the cool new features that are available to them in that smartphone. Now let's jump back to the analogy of using Salesforce and Lightning Experience, of all of the cool new features that are available in Lightning Experience. They're going to be like, okay, yes, it is dramatically different. Yes, it takes a while to actually learn it, but it's so much cooler because there are so many new features and there's so much more information that's available on the screen in Lightning Experience that it's well worth it. So it makes a huge difference. So as the admin, you need to push back over here. I guarantee that most, if not all of you, most of you are going to get confronted with the situation where people have unrealistic expectations as it relates to the actual delivery of the training and how much time that they're willing to allocate to actually provide the training to the people who actually need to get trained. Anyone have any thoughts or questions on any of that?
So I do.
Yes, go ahead.
You're advocating lots of remote training. I get that. But how do you deal with, I mean, I fight for classroom training every single time because I can't look over somebody's shoulder and see what they're doing wrong.
Yes.
How do you help the people who, and there's a subset of people that it doesn't matter how many times you show them, they can't figure out where to click. They can't figure out which is the left mouse button.
Yep. I'm completely with you. By the way, I've had clients where like the youngest person in the organization was 65 years old. So I totally get it. Like using just cloud-based technology was a challenge. Relying exclusively on the computer was a challenge. I totally get it. What I'll tell you is this. It requires working at a slower pace. I also recommend a hybrid approach where it's not exclusively, it can be done exclusively web-based, but depending on the users, depending on the culture, depending also on where people are physically located, it will make a lot of sense to do a blended approach where you have some that's classroom style and some that's web-based. But either way, I recommend doing the web-based training as sort of a reinforce, even if everyone is physically located in the same room and there's a large conference room that can easily accommodate, there's no training issue. And people said, don't worry, we'll just allocate like 1 or 2 hours a day to get through the entire curriculum. We won't do it all in like a boot camp one-day setting. I would still recommend, in addition to that, as let's call it reinforcements, to do like a lunch and learn web-based training. This way that will still allow you to create those recordings, even if not a single person joins that web-based session.
Yep. No, we do those too, but I fight to have hands-on live in-person training so that I can fix the problems.
Yep. I'm totally with you, Sherry.
Okay.
And I see Tamara put a comment in the chat, which is, how do you deal with colleagues not paying attention? So this is true regardless of whether we're talking about classroom style or web-based. By the way, I am going to share quite a bit more on this whole topic. Like, this is all good conversation. We're totally fine, so keep bringing it on. So that's a challenge regardless of whether we're talking about web-based training or on-site classroom style training. I can't tell you how many times I'm standing at the front of the room and the company's paid a lot of money for me to do all of that homework prior to even getting at the front of the room to do the training. I did all of the work that like I described to you here in this presentation. And they flew people in, they put them up in a hotel, they ordered breakfast and lunch and God knows what, they got a big conference room. And as soon as I get started, someone will step out. Sometimes they'll even make believe that their phone is ringing and they'll step out frantically and not come back for hours. Or they're sitting there and I know from their facial expressions that they are not paying attention whatsoever. They're busy with email, with Facebook, with God knows what. In the end, there's only so much I can do. But this is where I go back to, I rely heavily on the web-based training, because from my perspective, I'm trying to show them and teach them the tools that will help them do their own jobs. I don't get any benefit out of it. The reason why I get excited about doing the training is because I keep thinking about how I am about to empower the people that are in this room, the people that I'm about to train. And I'm about to change the way they work so that they can work in a way that's more efficient. It's better for them. And Tamara, to your point, as far as the incentives are for them. They want to work more efficiently. They want to find the phone number of that contact or prospect. They want to see their own pipeline before their boss actually asks them about it. So the incentive really is for them to do their own jobs better. And that's why I go back to understanding what they do and how they do it and what their pain points are. By arming yourself with all of that information, you will not only build the curriculum to address those pain points and to address the use cases, but also in your delivery, you're going to talk to those particular pain points. You're going to talk to those use cases. So when you're at the front of the room, you're going to be like, remember before I used to cut and paste the information from Excel into Salesforce? Well, now it's right over here. There's no need for you to ever do that, or to cut and paste it from one place in Salesforce to another place in Salesforce. You don't need to do that anymore, because here we took care of it for you. So by doing that, not only it will allow you to feel like you're sharing with them a little bit of magic, and it'll add that excitement and enthusiasm for you as you're doing the delivery. That is the key incentive for them. And in the end, no matter how you slice it, if you have disengaged employees, disengaged colleagues, there's nothing you can do. But what I'll tell you is this: I'm going to go on a little tangent, or I shouldn't even call it a tangent. I'll give you a little bit background on when, and some of you have heard this in some of the prior sessions that we had, where the topic of end user training came up. So I'll share with you what my experience was like when doing Salesforce end user training landed on my lap. So I was at GE Capital. First of all, practically every job I've ever had always included some element of training, some element of training people how to do something, how to use a system. There was always some element like that. And when I was at GE Capital, and I was on the team that helped to roll out Salesforce across our, we had 10 different sub-businesses. I worked on 2 of those sub-businesses. And at one point my boss turned to me and she said, this is approximately 2009, my boss turned to me and she said, listen, you know how one of your colleagues used to be responsible for doing all of the training across all of our 2,000 users and 10 different sub-businesses? I'm like, yeah. And you know how she recently took another job? I'm like, yeah. Well, I need you to take on her responsibilities in addition to everything else that you're doing. My head exploded. I was like, are you freaking out of your mind? What on earth makes you think I want to do that? I felt that I was going like 10 steps backwards in my career to start having to be responsible for end user training. I'm like, do you realize that I'm an attorney? Do you realize that I did the configuration and like, what? Do you want me to do end user training? You want me to be the punching bag of every single sales rep who says that their data is dirty or their pipeline is not updated because Giller spoke too fast, or they didn't understand my words, or I wasn't available to answer their question? No, you're setting me up for failure. I don't want to do that. She's like, I know, I need you to do it anyway. So I came up with, like, everything that I'm showing you here, I came up with this more from a CYA perspective than anything else. I needed to come up with an approach where, A, this is not something that I wanted to do initially. Once I started doing it, by the way, I completely loved it. This is not something that I wanted to do. B, I wanted to set myself up in a way where it was essentially foolproof, that it would be as maintenance free as possible for myself, completely scalable. So I'm using the exact same process, whether I'm training 50 people, 500 people, 5,000 people, it didn't matter. I'm doing it in a way where I needed to eliminate that biggest fear that I had, that sales reps are going to say that the reason why they're not using Salesforce appropriately is because of my training, some lacking on my training. So this blended approach of on-site classroom style and supplementing it with the web-based training comes primarily out of all of that. I wanted to make sure I did not want to be busy creating documentation up the wazoo. As soon as you create any kind of documentation, you can easily create a 400-page document teaching them how to use Salesforce. And by the time you hit save, it's outdated because someone changed something. Someone changed the validation rules. Someone changed the page layout. Someone added a new field. And now all of your screens are outdated. All of the descriptions and everything that you have in your document are completely outdated. On the flip side, if something changes in Salesforce and it's web-based, if you're doing web-based training, all you have to do is create a reinforcement updated web-based training session addressing that functionality. And now you can swap that for the older recording on the same topic, and boom, you have an updated curriculum. It's all fine. Anyway, let's keep moving along a little bit. Hang on one second. Why is it not advancing to the next slide? Here we go. All right, so let's talk about some of these things we actually did touch on, but let's go into this a little bit more. So classroom style training, pros and cons. So as someone who has, by the way, not only have I always had some element of training in my career at all times, for a couple of years, I was actually an adjunct professor for the city of New York, where I was teaching at Hostos Community College in the Bronx. I taught 3 classes at night. So I know a thing or two also about training, and particularly classroom style training. So some of the pros: body language and facial expressions. That is so completely, not only monumental, it's reinforcing also for the trainer, for the educator, the person standing at the front of the room to do the training. If you, just by getting the nodding of the heads, the eyes lighting up in excitement of everyone in the room, or only some people in the room, that gives you the feedback that, okay, they get it, they understand, as opposed to feeling like you're talking to a doorknob. So that's very, very important, both on the good side for the reinforcement, as well as if you're doing training and they're looking at you like, I don't know what the hell you're talking about. You just sort of need to figure out, okay, at what point do I need to rewind? Where did I lose you? And now you can start addressing only those people in the room. So you can only get that through classroom style training. I totally get it. Totally get it. You don't get that or not at all in the same way when it comes to remote training. So the trainer can also tell if the audience is distracted. So, maybe they're sort of nodding their heads, but they're nodding their heads in a way where it's like not really appropriate. And you can tell that, yeah, they're just reading emails and they're just bobbing their heads just to sort of make you think that they're paying attention. When you're the trainer at the front of the room, you completely tune into that immediately, and you know exactly who's tuned out and just bobbing their head like that a little bit. Also, most people typically feel more comfortable when it comes to learning. Most people feel more comfortable in a classroom style training. There is tremendous, tremendous value in classroom style training. So I'm not at all knocking it. Just the inefficiencies can make you feel, you as the Salesforce admin can make you feel like you're spinning your wheels trying to do the training. So let's talk about some of the cons. Coordinating the large conference room in order to accommodate not only the users, but also their computers. So let's talk about that for a minute. As far as I'm concerned, all training should be done in the delivery of it in a hands-on approach. All of the people that you're training, this is not like watching a movie. This is not Netflix. They need to be logged in, hands-on, doing everything that you're showing them how to do on the big screen. You're showing them how to use search on the big screen. They need to be performing a search live in Salesforce, whether it's in a sandbox or in a production environment, doesn't matter. So there are definitely benefits to doing it in a sandbox. If you have the patience to set it all up and teach them how to log into the sandbox and have data for them, that's completely fine. But coordinating for those people to be in a room, I've worked with many organizations, sometimes even smaller organizations, 15, 20 users, and they simply do not have a conference room available to them where everyone can come with a computer. Sometimes users don't even have laptops. They're all with a desktop. So trying to get the computers in a conference room is a monumental task. So this could be a huge sticking point when it comes to doing classroom style training. Next, employees often need to travel in order to attend the on-site centralized training. And inevitably, it leads to fewer training sessions of longer duration. Once we get people in the room, they say, yeah, let's just do it for a couple of hours. And I'm telling you, once you get to that hour and a half to 2 hour mark, Nothing else is going into their brain. You can keep talking and talking and talking, and they're not absorbing anything. You will feel like you're talking to a doorknob. It's going to be frustrating for you, and it's going to be frustrating for the people that you're trying to train. Let's talk about the considerations as it relates to web training. So with web training, some of the pros, first of all, you have a lot of flexibilities. You don't need to worry about a conference room. It's also incredibly inexpensive. You don't need to worry about any travel costs. It could be done in small time chunks like I described before, where you're just doing it, you're just scheduling an hour or an hour and a half at different intervals and until you get through the entire curriculum. And most importantly, you're able to capture a recording. I'm telling you, I've worked at NBC Universal. I worked at GE Capital. Believe me, they had resources. They had the technology. If we needed to create recordings, there was simply no good way to do a classroom style training and to have good quality recording of the instructor at the front of the room, of what the instructor is showing on the big screen, and the dialogue that's happening from the attendees in the room. It's not happening. On the flip side, when you're doing remote training, having the recording is so insanely, you need to find the record button. That's about it. It's really, really simple. Now, some of the downsides of doing web-based training, top one, you'll lose the face-to-face communication. You completely lose it. So you don't have the facial expressions. You have no idea if people put you on speakerphone, they walked out the room. Even worse, you hear them answering the phone. You hear them disciplining their kids. You hear them doing something else. And you as the instructor, not only is it distracting to everyone, you now need to find that user, that participant in the web-based training session in order to mute them so they're not distracting everybody else so that you can continue. So I agree 100%. It's really difficult to determine if the audience is paying attention. It's definitely challenging, even with everyone's best efforts. It's very challenging for people to stay focused when they're doing remote training. It definitely is a challenge. And, whoops, this is not supposed to be here. That's supposed to be on the other one. Never mind, we're good. That was the con for, hold on, did I? Yeah, I needed to put that here. I'll add it in later before I share this presentation with you. Okay, recording the web-based training. So, let's talk about let's sort of reinforce some of the other reasons why this is so important to have the recordings of the web-based sessions, even if you're doing classroom style training. So again, my ultimate recommendation is if the organization is interested, is ready, willing, and able to bring people together in a conference room in order to have them get trained classroom style training, go ahead and do that, but also do the remote training. So if that's the case, my recommendation is going to be first do the classroom style training because that's what they asked for and that's what they were excited about. Because if they're asking for classroom style training, I guarantee they're not going to be interested in attending your web-based trainings. So first you do the classroom style training. And as you're doing the classroom style training, don't be surprised that people are totally glazed over. Everything's going over their head after hour number 2. And basically what you're doing is you're going to remind them, oh, by the way, starting next week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, we're going to have these hourly these sessions, like just for an hour, hour and a half each day, where we're going to be covering the exact same topics, but we're going to do it remote as a reinforcement training. And then they're going to be like, thank goodness, because I have no idea what the hell you said over the last 4 hours. So that's really important. So this way you have both. One complements the other. So either way, you're going, my strong recommendation is you're offering that recording, that web-based training so that you can create the recordings. So the recordings are incredibly important so that you have the material available for new hires. Could you imagine you go ahead and you do, let's make believe there were no recordings. You go ahead and you do the classroom style training. And then 2 weeks later, you have a senior leader within the organization who says, oh yeah, I just hired 5 new salespeople. Can you do the training all over again just for them? Shoot yourself in the head, right? So this way, if you have the recordings, you can be like, yeah, I'll send you the links. By the way, you just put the links directly in Salesforce. You create a rich text component. You put it directly on the homepage, or even better, you can use the in-app guidance, the new in-app guidance functionality, where you can put the recording directly in the help menu directly in Salesforce. And you have access to, and if you're asking where the recordings go, whatever your whatever cloud-based file storage tool your company is using, whether it's Google Drive or a Dropbox or a Box.com or a SharePoint, doesn't matter what, and I'm sure your company is using something, go ahead and store all of the recordings there, create a folder or create multiple folders and put all of the recordings right there, and then just put a link to the folder with all of the recordings, either directly in Salesforce on the screen or in the help menu using in-app guidance. All right, let's move on along. So you have the recordings for new hires, for internal promotions. It happens often. Someone goes from being a sales rep to being a sales manager. As a sales manager, there's new features, new functionality, new apps that they were not supposed to be using before, but now they're expected to use. You covered them in the training. Maybe they were sitting in the room, but they simply didn't pay attention because DocuSign was not part of their responsibility. They didn't need to know, let's say, how to use Tableau. They didn't need to know how to use whatever other apps you were training for the managers, but now they're one of those managers. They need to access those recordings. So here you go, you have the recordings available to them. And of course, you're always going to have situations, no matter what, classroom style or remote, you're always going to have situations where people have a completely legitimate reason. They were sick, someone gave birth, so like there's a death in the family. There's always a reason why someone wasn't able to attend the first time. And this way you have the recordings available to them to watch to make up whatever they missed. And lastly, it allows people to watch the recordings as many times as they need. If someone says, oh, by the way, I sat through the training, but I still don't know how to log calls. Did you watch it again? Did you watch the recording? Like exactly what question do you have here? So by having the recordings, you're sort of forcing them to justify their question or their pushback in terms of like what is actually missing. So this way you don't get these random requests to come by their desk immediately and teach them how to log a call in Salesforce. So this is really going to help you in a monumental way. Any questions on any of this? Okay. So I sort of hinted at this earlier. My recommendation as it relates to deploying the web-based training, do it in, and when I say 1 hour intervals, it's okay to do it an hour and a half. Don't go to the 2 hour or more. It's not gonna happen. It's not gonna work. So generally speaking, I say just do it in an hour. And by the way, it's way easier to get sales reps to actually be willing to carve out time on their calendar if all you're asking them is 1 hour. That's a bite-sized chunk for them. That's good. You're going to try to ask them an hour and a half and be like, oh yeah, I need to drop off after the first hour. Can't make it for the last half hour. Is that okay? Or they don't even say that, they just drop off. So this way, do it. My recommendation, do it in 1 hour chunks. Do it as weekly training sessions. Pick some kind of cadence like Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Do it Tuesday, Thursday. This way you're alternating days. You're giving people time, whether they realize it or not. You're giving them a little bit of time to sort of process the information that you shared in the prior session, to come back with some good questions for the next session. This way at the beginning of the next session, hey, does anyone have any questions on what we got? Next session is, let's say, on Wednesday. Anyone have any questions on the material we covered on Monday? This way, let them come to you with those questions. Let it be part of the recording. Chances are other people have those questions too. So that's all fine and dandy. If you do it too close to each other, it's not going to give people enough time to really process the information. Ongoing maintenance. So after you go through the curriculum, after you go through the curriculum in terms of whether it's web-based or classroom or both, my recommendation is that you have these ongoing sessions. It's really up to you in terms of how long you offer them up, but basically these are ongoing bi-weekly lunch and learn sessions in order to address any new issues, any concerns, any frustrations, any ideas, feedback that the users have in order to improve the existing configuration, or even sharing the internal best practices. By having these, what you can call them lunch and learns, you can call them office hours, you can call it whatever you want, find some branding, some terminology to use internally within your organization. It's okay if you do it, let's say for a month or 2 or 3 after you roll out the training. Think of it as sort of like therapy session a little bit for your end users. This way, if they have anything that they are frustrated with, anything that they are stumped on, it's going to give them the forum where they can come to you and ask those questions. I'm telling you now, chances are most people will not attend. Chances are that what you're going to do is you're going to set these up, you're going to communicate it out to everyone, remind them about it, remind them the day before, remind them the day of. Don't forget, from 10 to 11 today, 10 to 11 or 11 to 12 or 12 to 1 today, we're going to have office hours. Bring your Salesforce questions, any frustrations, any best practices that you have. Chances are that nobody is going to bother you. Nobody is going to join that WebEx or Zoom meeting that you set up. But at the same time, what you're doing is for yourself as the admin, you're building that safety net for yourself. First of all, it's an hour that you're basically giving yourself as a gift to be productive and follow up on anything that you have on your to-do list if nobody joins. And if people do join, even better, you're able to actually answer the questions and help them out with whatever struggles that they have. But it's also giving you that safety net. It's a little bit of CYA where people can't possibly walk around complaining, saying that your training sucked, because you're making it very open and obvious and available to them that you are here to help them, even if they're still stuck. They did the classroom style training. They watched the recordings. They watched them over and over again, and they're still stuck on how to log their calls in Salesforce. You're still giving them a forum where they can come to you for help instead of walking around quietly grumbling in the hallways and complaining to everyone else, Salesforce sucks, the training sucks, I don't know how to do it. No, you're eliminating the ability for them. Well, some people are going to do that anyway. We all know that. But you're minimizing the ability for them to do that in a justified way. That's it for me. Those are my best practices on how to do end user training. So you guys tell me, questions, thoughts? I haven't really been able to keep up that much on what's going on in the chat window.
What do you recommend in terms of how long you keep people in the sandbox versus moving them to production?
So describe to me a little bit more about your situation. So they're in the sandbox because it's a brand new implementation?
Yes, brand new implementation, has not even started with these users yet. And I've learned a lot of what not to do's, and I would like to start them off in the sandbox. And of course I can, I believe I can just import their activities as they relate to.
That's going to be a challenge.
I can't. Is it? Okay.
Technically you can, but if they created contacts or accounts in the sandbox, and then you have to find, do those contacts or accounts exist in production? And someone else might have fixed a typo in the account or contact in production, and then you're going to overwrite. So I would recommend don't go there. Here's what I would do. So let's say it's a brand new implementation and the configuration is being done in a sandbox. And let's say pick a date where it's expected to go live, when the team is expected to start using, the day that conceptually the switch was flicked on and they're expected to be using Salesforce, that's your go live date. Okay, let's make believe it's a Monday morning, wherever it falls on the calendar in terms of whatever month, it's a Monday morning. So my recommendation is the week prior, you're doing training in the sandbox. And that's where you may or may not have pre-populated the sandbox with some data, some realistic looking data for them to play around with. What you can also do, I've done this very often, by the way, where I give them access to the sandbox, and there's only a handful of fictitious records, like records that myself and my team have created to confirm that all the functionality works right. And what I do is I start off at the very beginning, having them create just one or two, let's say create a lead. And I tell them, create a lead, use a superhero, a historical figure, like a celebrity as a fictitious record in the sandbox. It doesn't matter. You want to put in a record for Kim Kardashian, for George Clooney, for Fred Flintstone, like whatever, go ahead and do it. So they've created as a lead. I have them convert it. So now they've gotten the experience of hands-on creating a lead, logging fictitious activities and open tasks, converting the lead. We now have a contact and account, manually create that opportunity, add products to the opportunity, create quotes for the opportunity. So I'm having them do it directly in production. And this way, and it's totally fine, with the exception of, let's say, creating list views or creating reports and dashboards. It's completely fine for them to just work on one or two records, and that's it.
Okay.
And when it comes
Thank
to
you.
list view, my pleasure. When it comes to even training with list views, reports, and dashboards, then what I would do is I would still teach them how to create the reports and dashboards and list views, but I would also, for purposes of the training, I would tell them set the filters to like view all leads. In other words, they should be able to see all the fictitious leads that everyone created during that same session. And now let's say sort them or filter them based on whatever criteria they want.
Thank
Okay.
you. You're the
My
best.
pleasure. Yep. Any other questions that anyone has? Nope. Okay. So what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to fix, there was something that I needed to fix in the presentation. I'm going to go ahead and move that bullet point from one slide to the correct one. I'm going to share with you the recording for this. I'm going to put this on YouTube. You're welcome tomorrow. I'm going to make this presentation available to you. I will email you the link to it. I'll also put the link for this presentation in the YouTube description so you have it as well. Thank you all for joining. Have a wonderful evening. Stay safe, everyone. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Right.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.